Support for today's episode comes from Amazon. Amazon is working toward a carbon free energy future, doing more with less, investing where it matters most, and supporting communities where we operate. Georgia investigates data centers over fuel cost shifting. Georgia regulators have opened a formal investigation into whether the rate structure covering Georgia Power's largest industrial customers, a class now dominated by data center loads, is pushing fuel costs onto households and small businesses instead. The case turns on a rate design most companies have never had to think about, and its outcome could reshape how the state treats large load customers going forward. The Georgia Public Service Commission voted unanimously on July 7th to open an investigation into whether Georgia Power's real-time pricing, RTP rate, historically used by large industrial customers but increasingly a data center rate in practice, is allowing those customers to avoid a fair share of fuel costs that are instead landing on residential and small business ratepayers. The vote followed a May 28 settlement that resolved Georgia Power's fuel cost recovery case. It puts a specific dollar question in front of regulators: whether data center growth is reshaping who pays for the fuel that keeps Georgia's power plants running. Fuel costs and base rates are regulated separately in Georgia, and that distinction matters here. Georgia Power argues that large load customers lower everyone's infrastructure costs through the additional revenue they generate. Critics argue those same customers are not paying an equivalent share of certain fuel-related costs. Specifically, the investigation is focused only on the latter question, what the investigation will examine. The case grew directly out of this spring's fuel cost hearings, where a Georgia Power representative acknowledged that certain fuel-related costs are not charged to RTP customers, according to the Georgia Conservation Voters Education Fund. Commission staff presented an estimate during the May proceedings that the current RTP structure could drive average fuel costs up for all other customers by roughly 5% to 11% per month as data center demand grows, a staff estimate rather than a commission finding, and Georgia Power did not offer a plan during that case to ensure large customers cover the costs their growth is creating. The investigation will examine specifically how RTP customers contribute to pipeline transportation, hedging, and other fuel-related costs. The Commission expects the investigation to continue through the second half of 2026, a different mechanism than other states' large load tariffs. Georgia's approach is a meaningfully different tool than the large load tariffs already in place in states like Virginia and Oregon. Those tariffs, now approved in at least 23 states nationally, create a dedicated rate class with minimum contract terms and collateral requirements before a data center connects to the grid. Georgia's investigation instead targets the ongoing fuel cost recovery methodology inside an existing rate design that predates the current data center boom. Real-time pricing reflects hourly system costs rather than a fixed retail energy price. And the question now is whether that decades-old structure was built with the assumption that fuel cost allocation among customer classes would roughly balance out, an assumption current data center-driven load growth may no longer support. North Carolina policymakers are also examining how rapidly growing large load customers should be treated, although through a legislative task force rather than a utility rate case. Evidence that states are reaching for different regulatory tools to answer related cost allocation questions. The numbers both sides are contesting. The Georgia Conservation Voters Education Fund, citing testimony presented during the fuel case, argues that nearly $1 billion in fuel-related costs could ultimately be shifted onto households, churches, and small businesses that data centers pay nothing toward, an advocacy estimate rather than a commission finding. Georgia Power disputes the framing directly, arguing that large load customers already pay their full share of infrastructure costs and that the revenue from those customers enabled the company to freeze base rates through 2028, with at least $102 in additional annual savings for a typical residential customer beginning in 2029. Both figures can be true at once, since they describe different cost categories. The disputed billion-dollar estimate concerns ongoing fuel costs specifically, while Georgia Power's savings figures concern base rate and infrastructure cost recovery more broadly. That distinction, between fuel costs and capital costs is exactly what the investigation is meant to sort out. Why finance teams should watch this case closely. Georgia regulators have approved integrated resource plans that include roughly 10 gigawatts of additional generating capacity to meet projected demand, much of it associated with large industrial customers and data centers. A build-out Georgia Power has priced at approximately $16 billion. The company's generation mix is also shifting toward heavier reliance on natural gas, according to Georgia PERG, a shift that increases every customer class's exposure to fuel price volatility, regardless of how the RTP investigation concludes. That volatility exposure is exactly why this case matters beyond Georgia's borders. Energy cost and access have already moved into the top tier of site selection criteria for large load projects nationally, and a ruling that reallocates fuel costs onto RTP customers would change the effective cost of operating in Georgia for any company on that rate, whether or not it operates a data center. The investigation applies only to Georgia Power and does not extend to the state's other utilities. But a finding that reshapes RTP cost allocation would likely draw attention from regulators in neighboring states weighing similar questions about their own large industrial rate classes. Sustainability Soundbites energy coverage is sponsored by Amazon. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Amazon's Spotlight on Energy. For sponsorship opportunities with Environment and Energy Leader, please reach out to a member of our team.